I think we're ready. Thank you. Ms. Richmond, will you please call the roll, determine the quorum is present?
Chairwoman Harkey,
Here.
Mr. Runner,
Here.
Mr. Horton,
Here.
Ms. Ma,
Here.
Ms. He, I'm sorry, Ms. Towers.
Here. Okay, we're all here, and so a quorum is present, and the State Board of Equalization meeting is hereby called to order. We need Pledge of Allegiance, and good afternoon, members and guests. We will commence with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Sergeant Arthurine Bunny Clay. How are you? Ms. Clay served in the Army National Guard in Los Alamitos, Long Beach. Ms. Clay is a veteran with 20 years of service. Thank you.
Please face the flag, your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your service. Okay. Ms. Richmond, will you please introduce our first item?
Good afternoon, members. Our first item for this afternoon is item B, Corporate Franchise and Personal Income Tax Appeals Hearings. Item B4, Carlos P. Estiandan, please come forward. Board Proceedings has received contribution disclosure forms for today's hearings from the parties, participants, and agents. All forms were properly completed and signed, and no disqualifying contributions were disclosed. All parties, participants, and agents are on the alpha listings provided to your office. Each person sitting at the table will be asked to introduce themselves and, if necessary, their affiliation with the taxpayer for the record. 10 minutes is allocated for the taxpayer's opening presentation, followed by 10 minutes for the Franchise Tax Board's presentation, and 5 minutes is allocated to the taxpayer for rebuttal. Chairwoman Harkey.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the State Board of Equalization. Will you please introduce the items of this appeal, please?
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. The issue in this appeal is whether appellant's claim for refund is barred by the statute of limitations pursuant to Revenue and Taxation Code Section 19306.
Thank you very much. Sir, welcome to the Board of Equalization. You will have 10 minutes to present your case. The department will then have 10 minutes. You will get 5 minutes on rebuttal after they are finished. So please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the California Board of Equalization, and to everyone present. My name is Carlos P. Estiandan. My son is with me right now, John. We are here not to debate nor argue with anybody, but to ask the honorable members of the board to consider our case. Since immigrating here to the United States on July 31st, 1972, we have been filing our income tax return in a timely manner as joint account. But unfortunately, on January 2009, our accountant of 20 years abandoned me, taking with him all my personal and business financial records. For fear of being charged with tax evasion without the correct data, I failed to file my individual tax return for 2009. My wife, on the other hand, was able to file her individual tax return for 2009 and paid all the imposed taxes and fees. The other reason why I failed to file my income tax return was because of incarceration from March 15, 2010 to September 13, 2012 for overprescribing controlled drugs. I served my time graciously, conscientiously, diligently, and productively. I tutored some inmates to earn their general education development diplomas and learn English as a second language. I amended my life since then. And also before the expiration of the short extension time the California Franchise Tax Board gave me initially, I called them up and was able to talk to certain Miss Denotes, who was in charge of my case. I begged her to please give me a longer time of extension to file my income tax return, but she denied my request. I know that I tried my best to file my income tax return on time. And to point out an important point, also my only income when I found later on for 2009 was my Social Security pension of $31,738 and some casino winnings of $5,000. I am wondering why the Franchise Tax Board was applying $21,241.87 from the lien amount of $41,677.93 as my taxes for 2009. As for some merits, I served in the United States Air Force Reserve from July 1993 to September 2001. If we are lucky, we will be able to pay some of our debts and the upcoming, federal taxes, state property taxes that arrives in October. Thank you so much, honorable board members, for giving us a chance to be heard, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. To the department, please introduce yourself for the record. You have 10 minutes.
Also, excuse me for wearing the mask, for I developed a severe asthma and allergy as exposure to the Porter Ranch gas leak. So, please excuse me.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Harkey and board members. My name is Ki Nam. I am with Margaret Mornier. We represent the Franchise Tax Board, the respondent in this appeal. As you heard, the issue here is whether appellant's 2009 claim for refund is barred by the statute of limitations. Here, respondent took filing enforcement action against appellant because appellant did not file a return for the 2009 tax year, even though he received enough taxable income during that year. After not receiving a response from the appellant, respondent issued a notice of proposed assessment based on the income information that was available at the time. The notice of proposed assessment became a final liability because appellant did not file a protest. Then, respondent undertook collections activities and received the balance owed. The law on the statute of limitations is strictly construed. Unfortunately, there is no waiver of the statute of limitations for any reason. This is because your board has established that the statute of limitation is strictly construed, and a taxpayer's failure to timely file a claim for refund for whatever reason bars him from doing so at a later date. Therefore, respondent properly denied appellant's claim for refund, and we respectfully request that the board sustain respondent's action. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Sir, you have 5 minutes on rebuttal.
The period that they gave me was I was incarcerated at that time. And I have no time, to consume. My family doesn't know anything about it, and my accountant. So we are all in limbo. And that's the reason why I wasn't able, file. And like I said, that's I don't know nothing else to say but those things.
Okay. Thank you. Members, do we have any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
to the Franchise Tax Board, will you please clarify the statute of limitations regarding the 4-year statute and the 1-year statute? With the 1-year statute, would you please provide me the dates on when the payments were received?
Yes, I could do that for you, Ms. Dowers. The statute of limitations provides that respondent is prohibited from issuing a refund when a claim is filed more than 4 years after the original due date of return, or 1 year after the date of overpayment, whichever is later. In this case, the 4-year statute of limitations is later because it has run out on April 15, 2014. However, appellant filed his first claim for refund over a year after the statute of limitations has expired on May 15, 2015. And to answer your second question about the last payment date, the last payment date was on December 10 of 2012. So 1 year from then would be December 10, 2013. So the 4-year statute of limitation is later, and that's what we will go by.
And the payment on December 2012, was that, how did you obtain that payment?
That payment on December 10, 2012 was done through a collections credit transfer of $13.58. Prior to that, there were 2 other payments being made, and upon research, it looks like they were made through liens,
They were made how and when?
through collection on liens,
So, on a bank account?
on a lien for a real property, it looks like.
And when was those payments received?
Second account transcripts. Yes, I have the ledger right here. This is the ledger, okay. Okay. Actually, to be correct, there were 3 different payments made, and the dates of these payments occurred on November 13, 2012, March 15, 2012, and December 15, 2011.
What's the November date again?
So it was November 13, 2012, March 15, 2012, December 15, 2011, and there was actually a total of 4, including the December 10, 2012.
So you guys liened property that he owned, did he own that property individually or jointly? Basically, I'm trying to get to what type of notification did the appellant receive regarding the levies and the liens?
It appears that, and this is in review of our records, it appears that we've submitted a lien demand sometime around November 2nd of 2012. And that was after he was released from being incarcerated.
So was that lien on property that he owned individually or jointly?
I don't have that information at the moment.
It's jointly.
Sir, do you recall receiving that lien
It is
demand?
jointly,
So it was property that you and your spouse owned?
yes.
So, and do you recall receiving that lien notification that they were seizing some funds?
Yeah, I noticed that. I received that.
You did receive that?
Yes.
Here's my concern. When I first read it, I was really concerned that when they were requesting your tax return and leaning the funds, that you were incarcerated and you did not receive proper due process or proper notice. But what the Franchise Tax Board is saying is that they did lien joint property, and the first notice was sent to you while you were no longer incarcerated, and you just said that you did receive it. So I'm sympathetic towards you that you filed your tax return beyond the 4-year statute and even beyond the 1-year statute, but the Franchise Tax Board did provide you with notification, and you even said that you received it. So I don't see how we could
But
say that you have a timely claim for refund, unfortunately.
But as I have said earlier, my wife filed an individual tax return based on the income. And like I said, my only income for that year is my Social Security pension and casino winnings. So she filed their, income tax return in timely manner in consume with that 4 years thing that she is telling us. So since it's a joint account, I think we should be given some credit for it too.
Well, it's a joint property, so they had to notify your wife that her property was being liened, but the liabilities, the tax liabilities at that time were separate. She filed Murray filing separate and paid whatever that she was due, and you hadn't filed, and you actually had until April 15, 2014 to
That's-
file a return where you could still receive a refund, but yet you didn't file until 2015, and you were already released, in 2012, so you had 2 years from your release date to
I'm-
file.
I make sure, that I don't have any other income except my Social Security.
Okay.
When I finally found out from the IRS that my only income was the Social Security and the winnings, that's the only time I have the courage to file my income tax.
I understand that, unfortunately, to the franchise tax, but since you collected this, there's no relief in the offer and compromise arena since it's already been collected, correct?
That's correct.
No, but since it's a joint account and they should give credits to what my wife have submitted.
Can you speak to that, franchise tax credit? I mean, we have a joint property, but two separate tax liabilities.
Doesn't matter.
We don't have records with us regarding any return that his spouse might have filed for this tax year. That issue hasn't been raised until right now. We note only the joint return that was filed in May of 2015. And I would note that beginning upon Mr. Estiandan's release from incarceration in September 2012, but between the date he was released and before FTB received the large payment, about $40,000, a portion in late 2012, and a portion of that paid off the remaining balance for 2009. He phoned FTB 2 or 3 times and had phone conversations with collectors regarding this tax year and was advised he would need to file a return. So we know from our records that he was personally aware of the tax lien and of the payment that was headed to FTB, and he was given specific instructions on what he needed to do, and that would have been in the last quarter of 2012.
That is why, when I talked to Ms. Denote, who's in charge of my case then, I'm afraid that, if I submitted something and I omitted something, I might be charged of tax evasion.
Okay.
And,
I understand you, sir. Thank you, FTB. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any more questions, members? No. I just have one comment, and I need somebody to tell me if this is true or not. Probably appeals. Hello. When we have a tax liability and we have community property assets, aren't they subject, whether you file separately or together, they're still subject to be liened?
Oh, sure.
That's
Yeah.
what I thought. I was very clear on that, but I wanted some verification. So the house, if it was community property or jointly held, it just tenants in common, then that's just the way it is. So, I'm sorry. Okay, members, do I have a motion?
Sustain FTB.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to sustain the FTB. Any objection? No. Thank you. Such will be the order.
that means I won't have any refund at all.
No refund.
Since I submitted to the boards, the income tax that my wife filed.
Okay. Well, this case is resolved. If we've heard your case and we did not rule in your favor, if there's any other issues, you will need to pursue that. Perhaps the FTB can help you with that offline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're sorry. Okay, Ms. Richmond, what is our next case?
Our next case is B5, Centerpoint Diagnostic Imaging Services. Please come forward.
Thank you very much. And appeals, what is your name? I'm sorry.
Ambrose? Mr.
That's what I
Ambrose?
have in here, but I was afraid after last time I was here. Just
okay.
wanted to be sure I'm calling the right person, and I apologize. It's
No
usually
worries.
Mr. Anjija. He's around for the CCTFA, and I know him very well. Anyway,
Okay.
Mr. Ambrose, will you
Okay.
please introduce the items of this appeal?
Yes, ma'am. The issues before the board today are whether appellant has established reasonable cause for late filing its return to abate the late filing penalty imposed under R&T Code Section 19172.5. Then whether appellant has established reasonable cause for the late filing of its return as a basis for abatement of the late filing penalty under R&T Code Section 19131. Whether appellant has shown the estimated tax penalty should be abated, whether appellant has shown that the collection cost recovery fee should be abated, and then finally, whether appellant has shown that interest should be abated.
Thank you. Welcome to the State Board of Equalization. Sir, you will have 10 minutes to present your case. Then the department will have 10 minutes, and you will have 5 more on rebuttal. So please introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin. And speak into the microphone, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members and everybody here present. My name is Samuel N. Enyinaya, and representative of Center Point Diagnostics. I am basically not here to argue with anybody. I'm only here to appeal that the reason why I'm here was because I had made a honest mistake. When I got the bill, when I got the statement to make a payment, already there was a $25 surcharge to the amount, and I did issue the check to California Tax Franchise Board, but unfortunately, when I was mailing that check out, I did send it to IRS address. Instead of me sending it to California, it was sent to IRS, and the check was cashed by IRS. Well, I was completely oblivious of this until a year later when they sent me a notification that they have not received anything from me. And I said, no, I did issue a check. I went back to my checkbook and I said, it's here I'm writing a check. They asked me for proof. I said, here, I sent the check to them. They said, no, they needed to see a proof, to ascertain the stamping on the check. So I went back to my bank, Bank of America. It's been a while. So they said it's going to take a while for them to be able to pull a copy of that check out. So when they pulled a copy of that check out and I mailed it to them, to the franchise board, it was then, after about 3 or 4 days or a week, I called. They said they received it, and the gentleman I was talking to now told me, said, do you have a copy with you? And I said, yes. He said, take a look at it and tell me whose stamp is on the check. And I looked at it. Then that was when I saw that the check, the stamp, it was IRS that cashed it. And I said, I'm so sorry, I did not. That means if you look at the check, it was addressed to you, but was mistakenly sent to IRS, and they cashed it. And I've not really even had anything back from IRS telling me that they received my check in error. So this is the very first time I'm knowing that what I was supposed to have paid was cashed by another organization as against you. So what do we do? He said, contact IRS. I did contact them. They've not even up to now, they're still looking for the file. But then I asked them, I said, so how do we get out of this? He said to me, what I needed to do was to pay whatever has accrued in that space of time. Then I can then appeal the case because I said, it will not be good. I said, okay, I'm ready to make that same payment, $825 that I issued the other time, and then I'll deal with IRS. But I was told, no, that because of the time, they had to pay a penalty. Hence, he told me how much to pay. I believe it was $1,600 and something, and I sent a check to them, and then he then asked me that after I've done that, I can then appeal. Hence, my presence here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The department, please introduce yourselves for the record.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Harkey and members of the board. My name is Meera Patel, Sitting with me is Marguerite Monnier, and together we represent Respondent, the Franchise Tax Board. Respondent properly imposed the per shareholder late filing penalty, delinquent filing penalty, estimated tax penalty, and collection cost recovery fee, and appellant has not established grounds to abate any of these liabilities. The law requires respondent to impose a per shareholder late filing penalty for an S corporation that files its return late. Appellant filed its return over a year and a half late, and respondent imposed the per shareholder late filing penalty. Appellant's return was due March of 2014, and it filed its return in October of 2015. Therefore, respondent properly calculated the penalty based on the fact that there was one shareholder and the return was filed more than a year and a half late. The law also requires respondent to impose a delinquent filing penalty when appellant files its return late. The penalty is calculated based on the amount of tax due as of the original due date of the return. As previously stated, appellant filed its return over a year and a half late. Additionally, appellant owed tax as of the original due date of the return. Therefore, the delinquent filing penalty was properly imposed and calculated. The per shareholder late filing penalty and delinquent filing penalties were properly imposed under California law, and appellant has not established reasonable cause to abate these penalties. Respondent's imposition of these penalties is presumed proper unless appellant shows that its failure to file a timely return was due to reasonable cause and not willful neglect. Appellant argues that it mistakenly mailed a payment to the IRS instead of to respondent. This does not constitute reasonable cause to abate late filing penalties. Even if appellant had mailed the payment correctly to respondent, it would not affect either the imposition or the calculation of these penalties, because both of the penalties are based on appellant's failure to file a timely return. As your board's hearing summary points out, appellant doesn't explain why it filed its return late. It's the explanation of why appellant filed its return late that could potentially establish reasonable cause, and since appellant hasn't done so, it has not met its burden of establishing reasonable cause, and the penalties therefore cannot be abated. Moving on to the estimated tax penalty. S corporations are required to make estimated quarterly payments each year. When they don't make these payments, the law requires respondent to impose a penalty which is essentially equal to interest that would have accrued had the required payments been made on time. Respondent correctly imposed this penalty when appellant failed to make the timely estimated payment for the 2013 tax year. This penalty is mandatory, and there is no reasonable cause abatement to the penalty. Respondent also imposed a collection cost recovery fee because appellant did not respond to billing notices, and respondent had to undertake collection action. Once it's properly imposed, the law does not provide for any exceptions to this fee. Accordingly, there's no basis to abate it. Finally, appellant is not entitled to interest abatement. Interest accrues as a matter of law, and it's not a penalty, but rather compensation for appellant's use of the money after it should have been paid. The law authorizes interest abatement only where a taxpayer establishes either managerial or ministerial error on the part of respondent. Appellant has not alleged error of either kind, and nor is it apparent based on the facts available to respondent. Thus, appellant is not entitled to interest abatement. On the facts and evidence before your board, respondent respectfully requests you sustain its position. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I just heard them say that there was a delay in my filing in 2015, but that was due to the fact that when I mailed out my check in 2014, I was very convinced that I mailed out my check to the appropriate place. If they had not contacted me in 2015, there was no way I could have known that I was delinquent, because I looked at my account, the money had been the account had been debited to the said amount. So by being delinquent was because I was convinced, and I did mail out a check, and I had shown a copy of that check indicating when the check was cashed. So if he had gone to them, they would have cashed it, and I wouldn't have been delinquent. I'm not saying that I wasn't owing them, and there was no attempt on my part to evade tax. It was just that I made an error, and to err is human, and then to forgive is divine. I made an error, and it was a very, very honest mistake.
Okay, members, any questions? Yes, another line.
I have a question. The franchise, on the IRS, do they ever refund your money or give you a credit or notify you? It's kind of odd if they cashed an $800 check that
Yes.
wasn't your liability.
Yes, after what they did was, they were still into it because what they told me that if they finally get that amount in the account, two things will either happen. Either they're going to send me a check or they're going to give me a credit in lieu.
Right.
So, so that's why we have not received anything other than that from them. They just made a promise that if they investigate and find out that they actually took my check, which of course they saw it, they're going to give me a credit or they're going to give me a check.
Well, and that was 2015, right?
Yes,
And it's 2017 now,
yes,
and you haven't followed up.
I have not followed up.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did, the big issue is failure to file, quite honestly, failure to file your income tax, your FTB tax return.
Yeah.
What happened? You sent a check to the IRS. Did you send a return to the IRS, the FTB return, or what did you do with the return?
No. So I sent the return because my accountant, the way he prepared it, he said, mail this to the California Tax Board and then mail this check to them. So I wrote out the check and on my envelope, because that was the same day.
You put it in the wrong envelope.
In the
But
wrong envelope.
What happened? I get those too. You put
Yeah.
this one to this, and be sure you see it in the window.
Yes.
You know,
But
otherwise
the-
it comes
the
back.
reason-
But what I wanted to ask you though is that the FTB is claiming they never received a income tax return from you. Never received a state income tax return from you. What happened to that return?
So there are two things that I can think of now. He decided that I put everything in that same envelope that I sent to IRS,
Okay.
which up till now they are yet to send back to me. Because that's the only reason, because it wouldn't make sense me writing a check to them without sending the corresponding documents.
Okay, so you sent everything into the IRS.
Yes,
And so you didn't find out that you had not filed properly until you got noticed?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes.
The Franchise Tax Board, do you have any IRS transcripts showing tax return credits or tax return filings?
Yes, according to the account transcript for the 2013 tax year, there was a refund issued about August 2014, and he was given that $825 back from the IRS, including interest as well.
What year was it again?
The actual refund was issued August 11th, 2014.
Okay. And do you show him filing a federal tax return?
Yes, he also filed the 1120S with the IRS April 28th, 2014.
So the federal return was filed timely?
Sorry?
The federal tax return was filed timely?
It was over 1 month late.
Oh, okay, thank you for
Yes.
correcting me on statute, on filing dates. I should know that. Sir, so they're saying that the IRS did return the $800 to you in 2014.
So when this whole thing started in 2015, when I got back with IRS, what they told me was they're going to look into the issue. And exactly what I told her was what they told me when I was talking to them on the phone. So they should have looked down their files and then be able to tell me we have refunded you money, as at that time.
Okay.
You know,
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but they're saying that their records show that, although we don't have jurisdiction over the IRS, let's be clear, but their records are showing, when they received the IRS transcript, it's showing that the money was returned. To the Franchise Tax Board, was this the first year the S Corporation was supposed to file? Did they have a history of filing timely?
So, of the years that the S Corporation existed, it did file for the 2011, 2000, and 2012 year on time. It was just 2013 that it was delinquent.
I'm wondering if it isn't kind of reasonable cause, at least on the late filing penalty here, members, because I think he stuck at, what I heard him say is that he put everything in one envelope, mailed it to the IRS. The FTB has kind of confirmed that the IRS did send money back to him, after auditing their files. He did file late, but I don't think it was intentional, and I think there might be a reasonable cause if, I think he filed, he just sent it in the wrong envelope, and the proof would be in the refund. But I think the underpayment, the collection cost recovery, and probably the interest are valid.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, just, again, just to kind of get some understanding here of the dates and times. The filing, the 2014 filing. Well, let me go back to the taxpayer. It appears like the 2014 filing was late, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it was late. The check date that you wrote was May 1st.
Yes.
So you did file late.
But they gave me a penalty, $25. That was what my accountant told me for filing late. And it wasn't my fault. It was the accountant I was using that because he did a late job. And I paid. The check was supposed to cover.
So you paid the $25.
$825 was what I issued out. So
you paid the $25 because of the late filing
yes,
that you
that's the
did.
understanding according to my accountant at the time.
Okay, let me go back to the FTB. If indeed he would have paid the $825 on whatever it was, well, the check was dated 5, but say sometime in May, or sometime in May, and he would have sent it correctly to the FTB, and it was for $825, would that have been an adequate payment and filing?
The $825, had it been sent to FTB May 1st, 2014, it wouldn't actually affect any of the penalties imposed today, because the penalties are geared towards the filing and not the payment itself. Or the calculation of the penalties would not be affected.
So what does he think he's paying the $25 for?
I think looking at the federal account transcript, it looked like the IRS issued a $25 penalty for a dishonored payment, and then later he paid that $25 to the IRS again.
And why did you believe the $25 was adequate to make up for the late filing penalty?
Because my accountant at that time, anytime he does prepare the book, he gives me, this is how much you have to pay to this organization, this is how much you have to pay to this organization. So he separates them. There's no way he makes his IRS's account with the franchise tax board account. And this was the same question I did ask the gentleman I was talking to over the phone. Exactly what you asked me. I said, if I had not made this mistake and I sent in that check to you, would I have been delinquent? He said to me, no.
Okay. Let me go back to the FTB. What would be the right amount of the check that he should have written on May 15th? What would the right amount of check been?
On May 15th,
Of 2014.
he would have had a delinquent filing penalty of $200 per shareholder. I guess it's calculated until he files his return, so it's hard to say what he would owe as of May 1st unless he turned in that return at the same
Well, I'm going
time.
to assume that he actually turned in the return it mistakenly right now went to the IRS.
Okay.
So I'm going to assume, because again, clearly there was a check written, the intent was to pay something, he just sent it to the wrong address, and I am assuming that he probably would have included his return in that same envelope with a check to the wrong address.
Yes, sir.
So if he indeed did, if he did everything correctly, including his return, and would have sent that in to the to FTB in May 15th, what should the check have been the amount of?
It should have been for $800, and the delinquent filing penalty, the Section 19131 penalty, would have been either $40 or $80, depending whether it was into a second month late, the per shareholder late filing penalty under 19172.5 would have been either, it's 18, would have been either $18 or $36, there again, depending.
Okay, this is
Right.
that $800 because you have an entity fee.
Oh, thank you.
That's what it is. It's
That's
not-
right.
Okay. I hate that thing.
Our Venerable Chief, Assistant Chief
It's
Counsel has just
stupid
reminded me,
also.
had he filed the return in May of 2014, that would have been a timely filing during the automatic extension period. So FTB would then not have imposed late filing penalties and instead would have imposed late payment penalties. And depending on how much came in, there probably would have still been an estimate payment penalty. Depending when we got paid, there still could have been a
Well, let's assume
cost
you get, well,
recovery
again, let's assume he
fee.
paid the $800 to you. Let's say he paid $800, again, going back to my first question. If he paid $800 in the, or $825, excuse me, in the middle of May, and it would have gone to the FTB with the proper paperwork, how short would that have been to what he owed the state of California?
Honestly, we would have to go back and run various scenarios. I can't, I'm sorry, Mr. Runner, I can't give you a specific dollar figure. I could tell you it would be somewhat less because,
Somewhat less than what?
well, it would be somewhat less than the $200 current Section 19131 penalty and less than the, yeah, the 19172.5 penalty, which is,
I'm confused right now, because
$260.
all of a sudden we got $200 over here, and now, before you told me 40 and 80 and 18 and
Well,
36.
That was because I was forgetting that if it had come in May, it would be a timely return because it would be filed during the extension period.
Okay.
If the return came in May, there would be no 19172 penalty, there would be no 19131 penalty. In their place, there would have been a late payment penalty under Revenue and Taxation Code 19132.
Okay.
And then, depending on how much that penalty was, there may or may not have been an estimate penalty. And depending on whether there was still anything owed and how soon FTB received a payment, if it had had to issue additional bills, there could have been a cost recovery fee imposed. So those things I can't tell you.
Okay. And you believe you sent in the $800 with a $25 additional fee because that was the instruction that you had gotten from your accountant for filing it late.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes. That was what he told me.
This is not a tax liability from the true terms. This is actually that entity fee that you pay the $800 because you exist.
Yes,
As
it's
an
a-
LLC, it's the privilege of registering in the state of California, whether you
Yes.
make money or not.
No, yes.
Yes, okay, so I get now what we're doing here, and I didn't understand that going into this case, so apologies. But I think, I mean, I would like to see a motion for some relief here, and,
Before we make a motion, I want to have a follow-up question.
yes, please.
To the franchise, let me make sure I understand. You're saying that the $825, your accountant told you to send it to the franchise tax board for filing late,
Yes.
and you accidentally sent it to the IRS,
Yes.
and that was done in
In-
May of
in-
2014?
Yes.
Okay. To the franchise tax board, do you have a copy of the corporation return with you?
Yes, I do.
What date was it signed?
October 7th, 2015.
Here's my problem, sir. Return signed October 2015 is far from 2014, so the return appears to have been filed late. And
Well,
FTB,
extension.
well, sorry, you're right, on extension, due by the extended due date. So, but the payments weren't in yet.
No, but that was because I sent in, like
Thought he had already sent
Mr.
it.
Rona said it, if I had not made the mistake of sending the paperwork as well as the check to,
But
to these people,
but the check is dated 2014.
Yeah.
The check went to the IRS. The tax return is dated 2015.
yeah, that was when they
That's
got back
different.
to me.
The second one.
That was when they let me know.
I can't go with the second one.
That was when they actually let me know that I was delinquent.
So, FTV, when was the S corporation return due, and what's the extended due date?
So I just want to make clear that it's the 2013 tax on issue and not 2014. So the tax return was due March 15, 2014. So it was well after, it was turned in,
They had the extension.
It was a year late.
yes, it was
It
more
had
than a
passed
year
the
and a half
extended due
late.
date. Extended due date of 2014.
Yes, the extended due date of 2014 was passed, and he filed a total of 19 months late.
Okay.
Member
Can I just
Runner.
clarify that just
Sure.
real quick? Again, maybe I'm missing something, but I would have assumed that the second, that was a second return because you had thought the first return was sent in when the check was sent in.
Yes.
So
Was-
the second return that was the end of May was after you were notified by the FTB.
No.
No?
No.
When did you turn in that, when did you turn in, what
ev-
motivated you to turn in that 13 filing in 2015?
No, I didn't turn in anything in 2015. The reason being that was when I was informed that, look, you have an outstanding money, you needed to pay something, there's something you didn't pay us.
Right.
And that's when we started this journey. And I had to clarify that, look, I made a payment. So it took me a while. They told me all I needed to do in terms of documents to prove that I paid that money. And they were getting back to me in 2015.
Well, I guess I'm confused because they believe and have the paperwork that you filed the 2013 filing with a date of 2015.
No.
Well,
The
I guess-
2015 was the
Let me,
date.
hold on, isn't that what we have in front of us?
Yes, it's the 2013 return that was sent in October of 2015.
Here's what has happened. The 2015, that paperwork that was sent
Yes.
was after they got in touch with me that I have not paid. And since I had paid, and when I got my check, I went back to my accountant. I said, what happened here? I said, look, they hassling me that I have not paid. I have paid. So what he did, he now printed out the paperwork because, like you heard her, they didn't get the paperwork.
So again, is that the second filing?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a replacement of the
A
one that was
replacement
sent.
filing for the
Yes.
one, again, that's kind of what I'm
Yes.
trying to get down.
Yes,
So
yes.
you believe that was a replacement filing
Yes,
for the one that was done?
Yes.
When you sent the check in?
yes. And that was what my accountant, because I told him they can't get the money without the paperwork. So he printed it out from his computer and we sent it to them.
Member Horton?
Okay. We've got a timeline issue here. Question of taxpayer. When you filed strike that. When you made the erroneous payment to the Internal Revenue, you sent them the check for $800-some. Did you also send them the return that should have been sent to the Franchise Tax Board?
Yes.
You have any evidence that that was the case?
Because when they called me, they did not receive it. So it makes sense to believe, because I put the check in the paperwork, so it makes sense to believe that everything went together. Hence, I went back to my accountant, since I didn't have that copy again, for him to give me a copy. That was what happened.
Question of the respondent. Is there any information regarding a conversation between the taxpayer and the respondent that he indicates that he sent the check to the Internal Revenue as well as the return prior to now?
No, there is not.
During
Based
this
off,
process, has there been a testimony to that fact?
no, this is the first that I'm hearing of the fact. My understanding of his position was that he sent in a check and that The return was turned in October of 2015.
Did the respondent ask?
We did ask in our opening brief that why there was a late filing. There was no response given to that.
Okay, I would just, are you,
No.
I'm sorry, he's still going.
At what point does the department begin the collection activity?
So the collection activity began in September of 2015.
So if in fact the payment was sent timely, you would not have started the collection timely based on the timeliness of him sending it to the IRS? You would not have started collection activity on the amount?
If the payment was sent timely, we still would have contacted him about filing a return eventually, and that happened in September of 2015.
Yeah.
Yes, Member Runner.
So I guess the bottom line of this, for me, is whether or not I believe that the return was actually with the check and sent to the IRS. And I guess it seems to me that logically, if you're going to send a check for the amount of money you need to send, you would normally file a return with it. It would not make a lot of sense to just write a check and not file a return.
With no idea.
So it seems to me that indeed, and that what's difficult here is the only proof we have is kind of pretty interesting, and that is it's a check that was sent to the IRS that was cashed
And refund.
and then refunded back, all within a timely filing period with the FTB. So I get the fact, I know what the answers are. I mean, I know what you mean, Will. Well, even if we got the check, then there would still be an absent filing. But again, it seems to me the common sense would tell you that along with the check went the filing just to the IRS instead of the FTB. And so I don't think, honestly, I guess the better response, I guess, would have been if your accountant back in 2015 would have said, here's your original filing, let's refile it again. But the accountant may have just said, okay, let's print this out, date it for today, and send it back in if that's what they want.
That's what he did. That's what he did.
And it would have at least solved that, maybe not solved that problem, but at least the dates would have lined up better, and it wouldn't appear that you were filing something, a year and a half late. But anyhow, so I don't know. It seems to me that there was adequate motivation and action by the taxpayer to pay this, to pay it timely, and it just went to the wrong place. So I guess that's kind of where I would land on the issue.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, just one
Yes,
follow-up for me.
Sure.
This can't be the first time that a taxpayer sent their tax return to the wrong location. So, appeals, FTB, what's the process? FTB, what's the process when a taxpayer does, let's say they send their federal return to you guys, or their state return to the IRS. Do you know the process of getting it back to the right agency?
I'm not aware of any specific policy FTB has on that topic when it receives a return that is directed to a different taxing authority.
Okay. Appeals, do we have any prior case history dealing with late filing or timeliness when it went to the wrong place?
I can't think of any specific appeal that involved this set of facts, but generally I would say this wouldn't constitute, the fact that you made a mistake and you sent it to the IRS rather than FTB, that would not constitute reasonable cause.
That would not constitute reasonable cause?
That would be my opinion.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
Well, I mean, generally, reasonable cause, you have to establish that there was some event that happened that precluded you from timely filing. And a simple mistake, people will will argue that, they were they were in the hospital, or they were in prison, or what have you. And, over and over again, the board's found that didn't constitute reasonable cause, even though there, were some circumstances beyond their control. But as long as it didn't absolutely make it impossible for them to file the return, then it's been determined not to constitute reasonable cause.
I just have a question on that. If you filed a return and you mailed it improperly, and you didn't get notified for a year and a half from the entity that was supposed to get the money, I think that constitutes reasonable cause. I think that he was not aware that he'd made an error. He did pay. This isn't like delinquent taxes. This is the $800 fee that is the annual tax fee. That's the minimum tax that you have to pay the state of California. It went out, and it obviously came back because the IRS gave record to the FTB that on 8/11/2014 they returned the check, or they returned a credit to him. So they did get it, but it was after 2014, I believe, when the FTB noticed him that he had a problem.
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, my point, I guess I would say the reasonable cause is the IRS. The IRS didn't return his check. And they cashed a check that was not made out to them.
I think it's just.
And so therefore, he wasn't notified. I mean, it seems to me, again, if somebody writes you a check and it's made out to somebody else, the normal procedure would be for you to return it and say, hey, you sent us this check wrong, accidentally. Here's your check back. The fact that they cashed it and then didn't notify him, so therefore he did not have the ability to correct his mistake.
But they did give him a credit. They did refund it.
Yeah,
They
but
cashed
it was,
and-
he was already late then.
But
It was
not
already
by
late.
much. He's not late. They cashed it August 2014. So he had more than enough time to realize that.
But when did you find out who cashed it?
What they told me, what she's saying here is completely new to me. Okay? The people I spoke to in the IRS told me they're going to look into their file.
No, don't go there.
Oh,
You're listening to my question.
Oh,
My question.
when the check
hold on,
was
stop,
cashed. No, excuse me.
stop.
Okay.
My question is, when did you know that the check that you made out did not go to the FTB?
More than a year and a half later.
They cashed your check. They cashed your check.
Yes.
But you assume the proper agency cashed your check.
Yes, sir.
When did they notify you? When did they notify you that you had a credit? Or when did they refund your money?
I have no recollection of that because it was after the franchise board started talking to me that I then.
Okay, let me go back to the FTB. Do we know when they refunded his money?
Yeah, so the
When
IRS refunded his money over a year before we contacted them.
Tell me the year.
August 11th, 2014.
That was during the extended.
August 2014. So
Right.
August 2014, you got a credit, a check. No, what did you get, a credit or a check?
A refund.
A refund.
Was it a credit to his account, or was it an actual item?
Our records don't indicate a specification, just
Yeah.
says refund.
So you don't know if you got a check or a
Yes,
credit?
yes, I don't. I don't.
Do we know how they notified him? Or do we just have the fact that they recognized it? Do we know how the IRS contacted him?
Based on the account transcript, there are two indications. One, that the amount was, interest was credited to his account and a refund was issued as two separate items. So it seems like the system realized it and then gave him a refund for it.
And the refund was issued by the IRS. It would have been a check, unless he had, I don't know, maybe if he specified a bank account number, it might have gone there. But this was a refund, not a credit, and it was issued in August of 2014, and that was during the extension period
Okay.
for the corporation to have filed a timely return with California, but it didn't file
Okay,
it for
so
more than a
back to
year
the
after that.
taxpayer. Okay, I assume that did happen then. Did you just not see that? Did you not notice that you got that money back?
First of all, when I do my tax return to IRS, I request them to transfer directly to my account. So I don't receive no check from them. So even if they did refund, as she's telling me now, chances are that they did a direct deposit to my account. And since it was still within the tax period, I could have also assumed that it was something that was, that they owing me in return, because I also filed on both sides.
Do we have any
So-
indication? Do we have any indication of any correspondence that the IRS gave back to him at that time, or just the fact that they credited him and drew him a check? Or
Other than the check,
You don't?
we have no correspondence, no.
okay.
Do you show on the IRS transcript when the federal 2013 tax return was filed?
Yes, the 2013 federal return was filed April 28th of 2014.
And does it show if it had a liability or a refund?
S corporations don't have a federal.
I keep forgetting my
tax
law.
liability.
But that's important. So S corporation do not have a federal tax liability. Therefore, he would not have been instructing the IRS to refund his federal tax liability via electronic fund transfer, because there's no liability to refund.
Correct.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
we're making a whole lot of inference here.
I think,
The only fact that's before us of relevance from my perspective is that he did in fact send the check to the Internal Revenue, and a check that was labeled Franchise Tax Board. So clearly he had a misunderstanding and sent it to the wrong person. And if in fact that sort of implies that he was of a mindset, and if he included the return to the Internal Revenue, he was of a mindset that he was done, he finished, he filed this return. And so the fact that the Internal Revenue sent him a check, I mean, if I got a check from the Internal Revenue, I don't know how much I would question it. I'd hold on to it for a while and just say if they sent me enough follow-up letter, that's only because I kind of have a little experience, but I don't know if I would track it subsequently. I don't know if I track any check subsequent to issuing a check. So I don't think that that's reasonable to ask a taxpayer to have done that. And upon notification, he responded that he presumed that he had already filed the return. And if he was in that mindset, I appreciate the fact that if a person's in prison, they can still file a return. If they're in the hospital, they can still file a return. But if they believe that they have filed the return, then that is an imposition. I mean, it's hard to overcome that belief that you actually filed the return, you actually made a payment, and the right amount of the payment. And I think this is reasonable, and taxpayers should be relieved.
do I hear a
would so
motion?
move.
I have a motion. Is there a second? I'll make a second. And then, Member Ma, you had a question.
No, I'm just saying, as a practicing CPA for many years, this is always the issue, right? And we always ask taxpayers, I myself,
Yeah,
file
placed it in the
with a
right
return,
envelope. I'm agreeing with you.
with a return receipt requested to avoid this as some sort of proof. Either you go to the post office or you go to the UPS or FedEx to show proof of timely filing. Unfortunately, we're trying to figure all this out, but I know I've been dinged once because I was going on a trip and I put my tax return in the mailbox and I didn't have time to go to the post office, and I got dinged, but there was no proof that I filed timely, right? I didn't go down to the post office, I just put it in the mailbox by my house. And that's what happens without proof of timely filing. So I have a question for the Franchise Tax Board. The $800 fee is due when?
The $800 fee would be due with the first quarterly estimate payment, so it would have been due April 15th of 2013.
Exactly.
And there is no extension of that.
No, there is no extension, so that is when it is due.
Well,
Well, wait a minute.
there is a motion and a second, unless we want.
Objection.
Well,
There's an
Well, wait a
objection.
minute. I'm the maker of the motion.
Yeah, well, you can withdraw your motion.
So-
I'm trying to
so-
stick
so
to Robert's
withdrawn.
rules up here. Okay, the motion is withdrawn. Thank you. Now we may continue.
Just a little bit of clarification from the department, Franchise Tax Board. The reason I made the motion is because your testimony was earlier that he was under extension. And it sounds as if though there is no extension and that this is the actual corporate filing fee,
It's a filing.
not
It's extension to file.
file, not
not
extension to pay,
Right.
right?
So the extension to, I guess the $800 estimate penalty was, or estimate tax, excuse me, was due the first quarter of that tax year.
That's when it should have been paid.
It should have been paid, yes. The filing of that return should have been done March 15th of 2014, but wasn't done until October of 2015.
So it's the same thing you thought.
And it comes under the automatic, you get an extension to file, and that's automatic.
Yes.
But regardless if it's a corporation, as corporation or individual, you never have an extension to pay.
That's
So-
correct.
So regardless, he's late, but he's not as late as the late filing fee would still apply.
Yes.
Even if presumably you received the check timely. When he sent it to the Internal Revenue, had he sent it to you, it still would have been late. And
Yes,
the
that's-
late penalty still would apply.
A late penalty, either a late payment penalty, probably a late payment penalty would be imposed, yes.
And the collection penalty would not?
The collection penalty depends. So with his return, there was no check submitted. So with the,
Presuming that was a reasonable error, and he did send the check in, and
if he had any additional liabilities with, so he would have had an estimate tax penalty still, and any other, probably the late payment penalty in addition to that, then if he didn't pay those liabilities and he didn't respond to our collection notices, there would still be a collection cost recovery fee.
so the payment to the Internal Revenue wouldn't have been sufficient to avoid the collection activity.
Yes. We can't say for sure without actually calculating these particular penalties, because a penalty would change depending on when we received.
How much was the check?
The check was $825.
$825, and he sent it to the Internal Revenue when?
Of May 2014,
You started collections when?
September of 2015.
You wouldn't have started collections in 2015 had you had the money.
The collection that, I guess it's a lot of hypotheticals, only because
No, I'm only dealing with the facts. I'm not really making a hypothetical here.
So-
The only hypothetical is an inference that he sent the check in timely.
So in 2015, September of 2015, we began filing enforcement because we didn't have a return on file. It wasn't a collection. Once we sent that demand for tax return and he sent us his return, there was still a tax liability due. That included the estimate tax penalty, a delinquent filing penalty, the per shareholder late filing penalty. And because none of that was paid, that's why we began the collection activity. And that's where that collection cost recovery fee comes from.
Okay.
Okay, members, I personally believe he sent the check to the IRS. I believe that he sent it maybe a little bit late, which is why he sent in his $25. He sent the whole thing in to the wrong place. He may have even had a receipt for sending it because he had it in the proper envelope, but it was going to the IRS. So the receipt or not receipt for mailing, if you take something to the post office and get a receipt for having put it in, it doesn't tell you what was in, it just tells you had a receipt for it. I do that and I get my receipts, but it really doesn't help me, except that I have a record of I mailed something. I do believe he mailed it in. He mailed in timely, or a little bit late, which is why I sent in the $25. does sending the return to the wrong agency allow for a reasonable cause? I think it does. He didn't do it without forethought. He did it as it was a mistake, and he thought he had paid. So to make him, he wouldn't have had any reason to follow up. And if he got money back from the IRS, we just heard many of us would probably not question that. I wouldn't either. Like Member Horton says, I would sit on it for a while. I wouldn't want to spend it unless I knew exactly what it was from. But I've received money back where I've made a mistake and they've given me a refund for something. So I think he made a good faith attempt to file. I do think he did pay a late. I would say that on the $800, if he had filed it, if he paid it on, what did we say? He paid it on May 15th. May 15th of 2014.
It's dated May 1st, 2014.
Yeah, May 1st of 2014. I'm ready to find reasonable cause. I think he's got reasonable cause, and I think the only thing that he might be responsible for would be whatever that late penalty would be on the May 1st between when it was due on 4/15. Is it due on 4/15?
The payment would have been due March 15th, 2014.
March 15th, and if there would have been a late payment or a late penalty, because I think the payment's only $800. That's $800 flat, and he sent in $825. So what is the difference? What would be the penalty from 3/1 or whenever you said 3/15 to May? What would have been the penalty for that?
For a late payment penalty?
Right.
That'd be calculated for 2 months because it's for a month or each portion of a month. So, and the late payment penalty is calculated as 5% of the total tax that was unpaid.
Okay, well, I'm ready to make a motion to fine for the taxpayer with the exception that the late penalty, whatever that will be calculated to be, from the time the $800 was due till the time it was received or until May 1st of 2014, that be the penalty that is paid, the late penalty.
I'll second that, and to me, the issue is that it's reasonable for me to believe that if a person sends in a check, they send a filing with it.
And if somebody negotiates a check that's not made payable to them, how do you know?
I
So
object to
there's
that.
a motion and a second, there's an objection.
Evidence doesn't support that the appellant provided FTB with a timely filed tax return to cancel the late filing penalties.
I understand, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
mem-
Can we call for a vote, please? There's a motion and a second.
Chairwoman Harkey,
Aye.
Mr. Renner,
Aye.
Mr. Horton,
No.
Ms. Ma,
No.
Ms. Stowers,
No.
motion fails.
Is there an alternate motion?
Members, I would make an alternate motion to rule that the CCRF was applied in error and should not have been applied, because I do think it was reasonable for him to presume that he had filed the return, and had he not done so, he was imposed from being able to make the payment. Had he not done so, the payment would have been received timely, and the collection and recovery fees would not have been applied. So I believe they were wrongly applied under the circumstances. I appreciate that they were, and think they were appropriately done, and think that the respondent made the correct call because the reasonableness is left up to us. But I do believe, considering the amount, someone within the agency probably should have looked at this a little bit closer prior to expending all of these state resources to get us here. But anyway, that would be my motion.
So what is your motion?
that the CCRF was wrongly implied, well, that the respondent, that there is reasonable cause for the late filing, not reasonable cause for the late payment. Therefore, the late payment fee is due, and there's that the I don't even know if we can
Collection
legally-
cost recovery fee
Let me ask the
is-
legal question of appeals first. Does this body have the authority to adjust the CC?
Collection cost recovery fee.
Yeah, I think it's by statute, right?
Yeah, it's by statute. It's a fixed amount, and there's no abatement provision.
This is only $800, guys. Can we make a decision?
Yeah, it just seems unfair, you guys.
I think it's terribly unfair.
Yeah, the problem is the cost collection fee cannot even be waived for reasonable cause, which I think brings me back to the issue of that fact is, was there reasonable cause on the part of the taxpayer when indeed he wrote a check, filed, thought he was done, and wasn't then notified till later that, in the next following year, that that the filing was not received along with the check. I'm like you in the fact that maybe it says more about how we handle our finances or something, that if I got a check for $800 from the IRS and I do a series of filings with them, I probably wouldn't necessarily connect the dots either. So that's why I think the point of reasonable cause that gets us a path to relieve the taxpayer is the issue, the fact that the IRS did not immediately communicate return, and talk about that, give him clear indication that that's what took place. So I think that's a reasonable cause. That's why I supported the first motion.
Okay, so, do we have a motion? Member Brunner, will you just make a motion, please?
I think it's going to be the same motion that was voted on. I mean, again, I'd find for the taxpayer on the basis of the reasonable cause.
I think it's reasonable, too. I think we're running into problems here.
I'll make
Okay.
a motion.
Yes.
Move to sustain the franchise tax board.
That's a different motion.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Do you want to, let's have a vote.
Chairwoman Harkey,
No.
Mr. Runner,
No.
Mr. Horton,
No. I would finish the vote.
Yeah.
Ms. Ma,
Aye.
Ms. Dowers.
Aye.
Motion fails.
Okay, let's find a happy medium, guy. Let's split the baby here.
Well, it's more the language I'm concerned about than anything else. I mean, I believe that this is all reasonable, and I believe that if the respondent felt that it was reasonable, they probably would not have started the collection activity had they received the funds in a timely manner. And so, but that wouldn't be my motion. My motion would just be to adjust the claim for refund down to $334.50 plus appropriate interest.
Second.
Okay, let's run this around. We have a motion and a second. Do we have an objection?
Objection.
Of course, then let's have a vote here.
Chairwoman Harkey,
Aye.
Mr. Runner,
Aye.
Mr. Horton,
Aye.
Ms. Ma,
No.
Ms. Dowers.
No.
Motion carries.
Okay, your liability is $334.
Plus interest.
Plus interest.
It's
I guess.
refund.
No, that's collection cost
Oh.
recovery fee, so $334, end of subject, right?
He granted the refund of
The
$334.
department will
Yeah.
figure it out.
Could you clarify
Yeah.
exactly what the $334.50 is? Is that the amount?
Collection cost recovery fee that could not be waived per statute.
So all the remaining?
Everything else was voted on to be removed, except he is liable for the collection cost recovery.
Well,
Thank you.
That's not my motion. My motion is just to
That
adjust
was your
it.
motion.
Let me be
Okay.
clear. Let me be clear. My motion, as I stated it, was to adjust the claim for refund by $500 due to the reasonableness and administrative action that should have been taken place. Let me be clear.
By $500, you said adjust it down to $334.
If you.
Can you repeat what the motion was? I know we have somebody here. This is taking a long time, and I want this to be accurate because I'm hearing two different things.
What I wrote down was that Mr. Horton wanted to adjust the claim for refund to $334.50 and appropriate interest.
So adjust the
Thank you.
claim for refund to $334.
You're allowing $334 as a refund, Mr. Horton?
Yes. No,
Okay.
I'm allowing $500 as a refund.
Okay, so the claim for refund that we voted on was $334 from the $800.20. So $334 is...
No,
It starts out with $800.20 according to my records, and you
Well,
want...
No,
let's-
you want to-
let's do this,
838.
as we are discussing this, I make a motion that we rescind the vote, and let's let's clarify this, because we're off the record. I mean, I'm pretty clear what my motion was, but we're off the record. If we want to have this discussion,
Well,
we
I
should
asked
probably
I asked for the motion to be repeated. So the motion is, and if anyone needs clarification of the motion was what?
To adjust the claim for refund to $334.50 and appropriate interest.
Okay, so that's the motion that we voted on, to adjust the claim for refund to $334.50 plus appropriate interest.
So the
Well,
question.
then I actually made a mistake. I would ask the
Okay, so-
members to rescind the motion.
Let's rescind the motion and let's get the proper motion.
Okay.
There's a motion to rescind the motion
Is-
here, and a
is that
second from
okay?
Midland Runner.
Is that okay?
Without objection, such would be the order on behalf of the chair.
No, I'm just letting, you want to make a motion. I wish somebody would make a motion so we could get this resolved. I know you want to do something. I'm confused as to exactly what.
Well, first I move to rescind the vote.
Yeah, that was done. That was done.
We're cool?
Yeah.
The motion would be to reduce the claim for refund down to $500 due to administrative errors on my belief and the reasonableness in the filing of the return and late payment.
I'll second that, and then we can see if that's understood then by the department.
Please repeat the motion, Ms. Richmond.
Reduce the claim for refund to $500 due to administrative errors and late payment.
And deem reasonableness of the late payment and the late filing. Something like that.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second.
The objection.
We have an objection. Please call the roll.
Can we, before we do that, I just want to make sure that that's understood by the department in regards to what it is that is being asked. Well, I'd rather do it before we vote. Go ahead.
Okay, as I understand it, that the motion is to potentially allow a refund/credit of $500.
Right, to
Right.
grant.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. Motion, second, clarification on the part of the department. We have one objection. Please call the roll.
Chairwoman Harkey,
Aye.
Mr. Runner,
Aye.
Mr. Horton,
Aye.
Ms. Ma,
No.
Ms. Dowers.
No. Motion
Motion
carries. Your refund is $500.
Thank
Or,
you.
excuse me,
Thank you.
don't let me
Thank you.
repeat anything incorrect. We'll be back here again. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but this was just, that was a mind-boggling one.
Okay.
All
Where-
right. Ms.
where-
Richmond.
So our next item is item G, Tax Program Non-Appearance Matters Consent. These items may be taken in one vote.
Move to adopt that recommendation.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Such will be the order.
Our next item is G2, franchise and income tax matters. These items may be taken in one vote.
Move adopt staff recommendation.
Okay, motion and a second. Any objection? No, such will be the order.
Our next item is G4, sales and use taxes matters. These items may be taken in one vote.
Move to adopt staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection?
Don't object to consent items.
Such will be the order.
Our next item is item H, tax program non-appearance matters adjudicatory. Item H1, legal appeals matters. We have one petition for rehearing.
I think we moved staff recommendation.
Anyone want to make a motion on H1?
I think it's, sing it real quick.
Move to adopt staff recommendation.
Yes, yeah, second.
Second. Okay, motion and a second to move for staff recommendations. Any objection? Such will be the order.
Our next
Okay.
item is the administrative session. Item N, consent agenda. Item N1 is the approval of board meeting minutes for July 27, 28, 2017.
So move.
Second. Any objection? No, such will be the order. Okay.
Our next item is item P, other administrative matters. Item P1 is the executive director's report. Item P11, organizational update. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Harkey and members. David Gow, Executive Director. As far as the organizational update first regarding CEA positions, I'm happy to report that we have filled the BOE's Chief Counsel and Chief Deputy Director positions. Our new Chief Counsel is Henry Nanjo, and he's currently an Assistant Chief Counsel at the Department of General Services and is on loan to the BOE for 3 days a week through a memorandum of understanding. And our new Chief Deputy Director is Ms. Brenda Fleming, and she recently served as the CIO for CDTFA and previously held an interim appointment as the BOE's acting Chief Deputy. Henry and Brenda will both officially start their new positions with the BOE on October 2nd, and I look forward to working with them both. We will continue to work on filling the remaining CEA positions. The CEA action proposals for the Taxpayer Rights Advocate and the Chief Communications Officer were posted to CalHR's website on September 12th. We anticipate advertising for those positions, CEA positions, in mid-October. They need to sit out there for review for 30 days. So as soon as that clears, we will advertise. In reference to the Chief Legislative Research and Statistics CEA position, we are currently working with HR on finalizing the paperwork for that. So it'll be probably a couple weeks behind these others. The memorandums of understanding, which I've been providing updates on, were signed on September 8th by both the Director of CDTFA and myself. And as I've said before, those are for fiscal and business services, human resources, information technology, and communication and external affairs. As I also reported to you last month, we're working on an MOU with CDTFA for legal services, and I understand they're working on a draft, but I've yet to receive it, so hope to soon. As far as budget update, we continue to work on finalizing our budget for fiscal year 17-18. I'm working with your offices, and I'll send you emails as we work towards completing it. As you're aware, the draft budget is lean, and so we're being careful as far as that goes. AB 131 was recently enacted effective September 16th, and it includes provisions that were intended to clarify AB 102, which was obviously the bill that restructured the BOE and created CDTFA and the Office of Tax Appeals. And regarding appeals, that was part of what they AB 131 was to clarify, including appeal-related actions for matters that will be transferred to OTA pursuant to AB 102. It's intended in part to clarify and limit matters that the board may hear for the balance of the year. As far as an area that is concern of me, obviously, is the internal audit area, which we do not have an internal auditor, the Board of Equalization, and this function is not covered in any of the MOUs with CDTFA. So in an effort to ensure we have coverage for risk areas of our organization, I've been in contact with the Department of Finance And I will provide you with an update when I have additional information on how we can address the internal audit function. In reference to State Leadership Accountability Act, it's referred to as the SLAY report. The Department of Finance will be providing us a training on the SLAY reporting in October. And these are the reports to the Department of Finance that requires each state agency to maintain effective systems of internal control, to evaluate and monitor the effectiveness of these controls on an ongoing basis, and to biannually report on the adequacy of the agency's system of internal controls. The SharePoint site, hopefully your offices, they've been utilizing it. I know they have. We've created a site for the BOE to use to in the place of the intranet site that we had previously. We have on there, for example, a board meeting material, the MOUs, information on the tax programs, several items of employee information, and web services. So we have been receiving suggested improvements to it as we go from your offices, and I know that we've been receiving positive feedback from your offices as well, so thank you for that. And then just to close, again, I continue to work with Government Operations Agency as well as the Director at CDTFA as we continue with the transition, and I know there's a lot of patience that it requires, and we look out for the interests of our staff and the board. And again, I'll continue to send you emails on the transition progress and provide these monthly updates. So on this, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Member Horton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gao. Where are we in determining the need for additional staff to support the legislative unit and these other CEAs? And appreciate the notice that we're working on an MOU for legal services. Is that to presume that instead of actually hiring legal staff, we're going to have an MOU instead or in lieu of?
Part of it, to answer your question, as far as the legal services, are even to the extent of their ability to assist with the balance of this year, state assessee appeals, even the appeals conferences with respect to those. I have continually, and even as of last week, have kind of made it known to government operations that I feel that we were understaffed in certain areas of the agency. I know, for example, the Public Records Act requests, our staff just received training on that, and that again was the staff that came with me from the Board of Equalization, who had not previously we had a whole section in legal that handled Public Records Act requests. They had 5 people, we got none. So we are clearly short, and we have started a list by functions to then attribute that to what are the real needs related to personnel. What number of people do we feel that we are short? So we have started the progress. I don't have an answer here today for you, though. But we do feel that we did not receive adequate support staff, whether it's in legal or some of the program administrative areas primarily. So legal and administrative are the 2 areas that I see a clearer need of additional staffing.
Do you anticipate a MOU or some way of obtaining support in those areas?
There's a couple options that we're considering. Part of it, and again, I'm trying to keep that dialogue with the Government Operations Agency, but obviously it's a Department of Finance and it's a budget matter as well. But it is, as you have brought up in previous meetings, and something I'm very concerned about as well. So we do need to clearly articulate what those needs are.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, I do. I think I would like to target October. If members have certain items that they want cleanup legislation for, I would like to target getting something to the board by October so that we could work this in. This was done, the bill was done very hastily. There is some cleanup language that was done with 131, but I do think that some of the areas that were split that shouldn't have been, or that should still be as one unit, I think to go back and try to correct that is good for the agency as well as good for the other agency that has the remnant pieces. And it's good for our personnel, our taxpayers who can go to one spot rather than shifting around, as well as the assessors. So would be my goal to try to get anything with regard to property tax under one roof as it was envisioned to be, and as the statutes were split up, that isn't the case, not what happened. I would also like to work with Mr. Gah as he goes forward with finance to ensure that we do have an agency that, has the pieces that it needs. If you look at the staffing that we have, I think that in effect, we're going to need some higher level spots because they're going to have to be multitasking. It's a small agency. You're not going to be able to have a lot of, just you do one thing type of personnel. We're going to have some higher level people. And I think that as we get into different things with member staffing and whatnot, I think we can kind of do that in tandem. So I'd like to see some kind of organization for that and thoughts on the members' parts. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's important that we get in front of the budget because it's happening now.
I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. I think that one of the things that we talk about in the office is the change on the BOE, myself and my staff, it is much more of a, rather than directing other staff to do work, it's more of a roll up your personal sleeves and get the work done kind of position, in the agency's transition. So our sleeves are rolled up tight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next item is P12, Board Committees.
Members, I did ask that this be brought up because of what's happened, so I'll let Mr. Gow deliver his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harkey and members. David Gow, Executive Director. Historically, the Board of Equalization's business is generally conducted in two forums. Those are the regular meetings of the board and board committee meetings. Board committees are established by the chair of the board and function as standing advisory committees of the board. Each committee is chaired by a board member and is staffed by an appropriate executive manager. A board committee recommendation is presented to the board for approval during the board's administrative session. And there are currently 4 committees, the Property Tax Committee, Business Taxes, Legislative, and lastly, Customer Service and Administrative Efficiency. Due to changes and modified responsibilities of the BOE, the need and appropriateness of the committee structure should be reevaluated. Considering that the BOE has been narrowed to primarily focus on property tax matters, I would recommend that the board no longer use the committee process, and instead matters that require board action, including policy matters, can go or come directly to the board. For example, the property tax deputy director can present issues via an issue paper or a detailed memorandum to the board for discussion and adoption. The legislative research and statistic chief could bring legislative proposals for BOE sponsorship consideration directly to the board as well, and report to the board on pending legislative bills of interest for BOE position consideration. Taking these matters directly to the board will also eliminate the additional steps of drafting committee minutes, obtaining committee chair approval, and then taking the minutes to the board for approval at that same meeting. I think we anticipate next year's calendar likely being one-day meetings, and the turnaround time of doing a committee recommendation right to the board seems to be kind of an unnecessary step. And so I think this would streamline the board's meetings, improve efficiency, and save time. And with the reduction right now of staffing levels, the elimination of committees, I think would greatly aid in handling these matters. But I would like to emphasize that staff would continue to use the interested parties process prior to bringing matters to the board when appropriate. As you're well aware, the IP process has been successfully used at the agency since the early 90s. And in general, that process includes BOE staff drafting and revising documents, interested parties providing comments, proposed changes on the drafts, and then submitting those back to BOE staff for review and consideration. The staff then drafts a matrix to identify outstanding issues, holds meetings with the parties to discuss the proposed changes to the document, and then we draft an issue paper if there's any unresolved issues. We try to resolve as many as possible, obviously, in the interested parties process, and only bring those unresolved issues to the board. And then the executive staff presents those revised documents via an issue paper to the board for their discussion and adoption. We're also a little concerned that the committee process may be impacted by the recent changes of the government code. And under the committee process, committee chair works with the board executive director, staff, BOE staff to determine committee work plans and related agenda items for each committee meeting. And the government code appears to question that, the appropriateness of that process. So I guess in conclusion, I'd recommend that the board no longer use the committees, and instead I would recommend that matters that require board action, including policy matters, go directly to the board, and that staff would continue to use the interested parties process prior to bringing matters to the board when appropriate, via an issue paper or a memorandum. That concludes my presentation. I have to answer any questions.
Thank you. The committees are under the purview of the chair, and so I'd like to know, I am thinking probably for the remainder of the year, in any event, we probably don't need to have standing committees, but I would like to leave it up to the next chair to, if we have ad hoc, or I was thinking more ad hoc committees as the need arose on the board, rather than the standing committees. I know we are still working on processes for communication and outreach and education, and so I'd imagine that would be something. But tell me, if we have interested parties meetings, then the board member staff could attend those. Is that correct?
Yes, certainly. They would be noticed through our communication process for interested parties, yes.
Yeah, and I think that might help us avoid the Bagley-Keene issues that we tend to labor under through an IP process. But I'm open to suggestions. Yes. Anybody? Member Runner.
Yeah, I concur. I think that at this point that we have such a limited role now in regards to some of these issues that these issues are adequately brought before the whole board. I certainly think I don't think by taking this action that we are limiting ourselves for what we may choose to do in the future for a temporary committee to do work on some things or whatever. But I think the idea of the establishment of the standing committees that we have, the 4 of them, are not consistent with the role that we have right now. So I would agree we should terminate the committees and just work as board members on all of these issues.
Right, and then leave it up to the board to suggest that maybe an ad hoc committee be formed for specific items. And also ensure that board members are notified of any IP process, because I think any changes to property tax rules or regulations or whatever would have to go through an IP process.
And I would anticipate that executive staff would be coming through. What I anticipate happening are more emphasis on deputy director reports, especially once we get the other CEAs filled out for whether it's communication or legislative and property taxes already is filled. But those reports would be bringing matters for the board, and if there's, what we're trying to make sure is that we have board direction. Of board-voted direction if it's not staff-generated direction. And we would want to make sure, even if it's staff-generated, that we are informing the members that as we go move something forward, you're going to know about it in advance, and we will bring through discussion like we're having right now those matters so that you're aware what we're working on.
Right, and it would be to the entire board,
Yes.
and then you would have some clear direction. You would have a staff report or whatever
Correct.
issue item that you bring forward, and we talk about it and get it resolved. It's very similar to how county government or city council is run.
Okay.
And, if they need an ad hoc committee, they go out and form one and get it done. But I just don't think we have the staff right now to assign to formal committees. And I think I would rather focus very much on getting the staff that we need in the particular spots and making allowances for any changes that are going to happen in the budget, because I'm sure there will be some.
And I very much appreciate that comment right now, given the limited staff we have. Thank you.
Yes, you have limited staff, and you have limited positions,
Yes.
because a lot of the higher level positions chose to go over, and then you have newer people that still have a big learning curve.
And we have vacancies. I don't even have
You have a lot of
executives in some of these
vacancies.
yet.
You have a lot of vacancies.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think that's agreed, at least for now, and after the first of the year, we'll regroup.
Thank you.
Our next item is P13, the approval of the board meeting date change for December 2017.
We have how many cases on the agenda for December?
She's looking.
Yeah, I think there's 7 FTB. but I
We have a
think-
total of 41 cases.
We have a total of 41 cases. Now, with the FTB claiming that their work would not be finished, I think they have 30 days to file an appeal, do they, or they have 30 days before
It goes final.
it goes final. So it may be that we will need to drop those FTB cases anyway. How many cases would that be then on?
There are only 4 franchise cases scheduled.
So 4 franchise. So we have a really busy schedule. Now, assuming some of these members will drop, we did schedule 3 days for December. Member Horton is not able to attend on the 13th, but we did have a quorum, and I have made the suggestion that maybe the week before, we could have a day there that might be a tentative date.
Hold on, let's see, so, let me check a look here, okay.
Because everybody except Member Horton can show up on the 13th, but there were no other dates offered, as I understood it.
That's my understanding as well.
You don't think we could
We've got 41 cases. I'm just thinking we might want to put a hold on a date in case
It's Sacramento, right?
it's Sacramento. Is
And
it
I
around tree lighting?
Excuse me, Ms. Harkey, if we go the week before, we will not have enough time to notice the taxpayers.
Oh. So we're then the 11th, 12th, and 13th, then is it?
Why not 14th?
Skip the 13th?
Skip 13th.
You want to skip 13?
Yeah, or 15th, Friday.
I
You can only
could,
go forward.
we could do, can anybody be here the 14th or the 15th?
Yeah.
Members, thank you for the consideration. I can look at seeing if I can kind of move things around for the 13th as well. It was just when I had previous vacation plans, and so don't know exactly what
I
it's going to
understand.
cost to accommodate, but I will see if all the parties involved will adjust for the 14th, but if you would consider the 13th, if you would consider the 14th just as an option, I would seek to get back to you expeditiously.
Let's hold the 14th as well then.
We are sending our notices out this Wednesday.
This Wednesday, Member Horton will be back to you by then, no problem, right?
Wednesday
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Can't we notice 13 and 14?
Yes.
And then adjust subsequent to that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's
That
do
would be
that.
my
Let's do that. We may need them all anyway, but let's do that for sure.
So right now, we're the 11, 12, 13, and 14, with the possibility of one of those days not happening.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, members. This is busy.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Mr. Gow, I just wanted to share a thought on item 1. To the extent that there can be some resolution as to what the administrative support staff is going to be for the CEA positions, it might weigh heavily on the application process. individuals might be more inclined to apply if they believe that they have the administrative support in order to accomplish the duties assigned to the CEA positions.
And I would agree. We have a couple, there is a support position that was appended to the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office. We're looking to think, is that something that could be shared beyond just the TRA office, that it could maybe help with the legislative research. So we are, if nothing else changed, we're looking at how best do we use the resources that we've been giving.
Okay.
But not giving up on we need more requests as well.
Well, let's
Good luck.
form a united front
Thank
and
you.
try to get our budget right and get the agency standing so that everybody feels comfortable, the staff feels comfortable, and they feel like they have the proper support. And so that, time is kind of the essence here, and
it is.
I really want to be sure that they see that there are promotional opportunities or options for them, and that I think that if we have the proper positions, we can attract some good staff. It just, right now, everything's too up in the air. So as soon
Thank
as
you,
we
I'd
can
agree.
get that. Whatever help you need, more than willing to assist. If anyone on my staff can assist. I know Lisa did a lot of personnel. We'll volunteer her early, Ms. Renati.
Thank you.
See if she can help you with anything. She hired a lot of people in her time, and so maybe she can help with whatever requests we need. Or, and I don't know if other members have anybody that they would be willing to volunteer to assist, because I think you only have 4 people.
Yes, that's about
Yeah,
right.
you only have
yes.
4 people, and they're creating their, what I call job assignments, I don't know, duty
Yeah.
statements, and everything else. They're trying to get all these things done, and I think if members have anybody that they could volunteer to work for one of Mr. Gao's staff as assigned, it would be helpful right now.
Can we do that?
There are conditions. It's usually the other way around, that there was in the AB 102 that there was the concern about staff working for member offices.
I think that you
have to
could.
look at
you
the
could-
member
you
offices
could-
coming to work in the agency.
Well, not working for the agency, but they could stay in their office,
Yes.
and they could type up certain documents and
Sure.
stuff and forward them to you guys for your approval. I mean, it doesn't have to be just one person sitting there at the computer. I think we
Yeah.
can all pitch in, so to speak, Remember that?
We'll be creative and look at
Pitch
where there's
in.
opportunities for that to happen.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know we have experienced people on our member staff, and I'm sure they'd be more than willing to drop a
Well,
few items
I'll
for you to
just,
help you.
for an example, maybe if you have someone that, SharePoint, I've got the staff person I had, that she's been doing a great job on it. She's doing about many, many other things as well, and that's really that SharePoint site is hopefully benefiting your offices, and so that might be something that,
Yeah, SharePoint.
So, I would welcome the opportunity to look into that.
Draft duty statements
Yes.
per your request. I mean, I
Mhm.
think you can ask us to do some things and give us some deadlines and get back to you with them to just follow up. I don't think anyone here would object. I just don't, as long as you're requesting some help. I
we'll go
think
back
we've
and
got
look
some
at
bodies.
where there might be some opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next. Is that it? Are you finished, Mr. Gao?
I'm finished,
Yes.
yes.
Next is closed session. The members will now go into closed session to discuss personnel matters.
Ms. Richmond?
The members met in closed session and discussed personnel matters, and there is an announcement.
We have one announcement. Mr. Gow.
Chairwoman Harkey and members, as I informed the board in closed session, I plan to retire at the end of this year. I want to thank the members and staff for the former BOE employees for their support during my time as the executive director. When you begin your career in 1981 as an Auditor 1, I never would have imagined going through 12 different positions in 7 different departments over my 36-year-plus career. I feel it's a good time to retire while still working through a few of the transition issues during the balance of the year. I'm excited about the next chapter in my life, and I'd like to close by thanking my wife, Terry, my sons, Connor, Tim, and Dan, for their support during this time, especially the last couple of years. So anyway, with that, thank you very much, and I'll see you through the end of the year.
Thank you very much. Drinks are on you.
Madam Chair?
Okay.
Madam
Yes.
Chair.
I'd like to, again, we talked some, but I think there's room for us to publicly have some discussion here, too. I want to thank you, David, for especially the time. Obviously, there's been some challenging times over the last year or so, but certainly in the last few months when the board has been kind of redesignated, it's been a very important time to have steady leadership, trying to figure out how to reconstitute everything and to be that bridge. And I appreciate you staying on through that time, because I know very well you could have punched out during that. And so I think the time that you've been able to contribute to the state and to us in this extended 6-month period after that has been very important for an orderly transition. So I thank you personally for that.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Member Horton.
David, I also want to extend my appreciation for your efforts over this transitional period. You have certainly brought some balance to your experience in the property tax area. It's been extremely valuable. I appreciate that. But most of all, I want to tell you, congratulations, man. Enjoy your retirement and your family, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I'd also
Stour.
like to thank you for your service. You've been a great executive director for the Board of Equalization, and especially over the past several months. So thank you very much. And yes, I'm going to be one of the happy people. Enjoy, get out, walk, beach, play, fun.
I appreciate it. I plan to.
And yes, thank you. As chair last year was great working with you, fellow CPA. You get
Yes.
where I was going with a lot of the issues that I had, and I just want to thank you for working closely with me and my team.
Thank you, Member Ma.
And I, David, would also like to thank you for getting us through this transition, going through last year, which was hellacious, to say the least. This year, again, we've had a short experience together, but it has not been uninteresting, shall we say. And
fair
I
to
think
say.
there's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot going on. We've been through a lot of crises together, and so I do want to thank you very much, and thank you for giving us this long notice. And I think the staff, too, appreciates knowing, but I think you will be missed by them. You are beloved among the staff.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you know that.
It'll be the people that we remember when we retire that you've worked with. I think that'll be the memories that I'll carry with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will recess this meeting until tomorrow morning at 9:30.